Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NFL Live Before Lock Showdown Series. This is an expansion of our Three Fellas Talking Football series from last season. We'll be running a show up until kickoff for Thursday, Sunday, and Monday primetime games. Tonight, with me, I got my man Nolan Kelly. Nolan, say hello to everyone.
What's happening? That was an energetic start after a kind of weird NFL Sunday here, hey? I feel like it's been odd from a fantasy perspective. How are your lineups doing?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and echo your sentiment. Yes, an odd day. It seems like there's a lot of odd days lately, but some luck along the way. Excited for tonight's matchup, though. We got NFC East showdown. The Dallas Cowboys hosting Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas 2.5-point favorites tonight. Over under 49.5. Nolan, who do you like tonight, Philly or Dallas?
Actually, I like Philly a lot in this one. I like them -3 on our betting show that we have every Friday. I took the Eagles. I think all three, myself, Ben Rasa, and Jordan, were all on the Eagles. To me, we have two inactives just coming in now as well. It looks like the Dallas Cowboys offensive line is still going to be in shambles there. La'el Collins is inactive. Tyron Smith is inactive. That does not bode well against this Eagles pass rush. So I will take the Eagles plus the points if you happen to be sprinkling a little bit of cheddar on there. Before we get started, though, we should also mention our sponsor, FantasyDraft. If you haven't played over on FantasyDraft, you absolutely should. I was just looking at some of Ship My Money's lineups today. He had some great ones in there. Alex, I don't know if it was him or Alex Osmo Baker, but they were talking about just using Aaron Rodgers today because he was so low owned as your main pivot point in an otherwise chalky lineup, and that sure worked out well. I actually didn't end up using him because I'm not as sharp as those guys, and it didn't work out as well for me. But also, I was worried about who to pair him with. And it was kind of difficult to see with Valdez-Scantling and Allison injured and just so many random weapons there. And it turns out you didn't really need to pair him with anyone, or you could just pair him with one person or one player, say Jimmy Graham. But anyways, playing over on FantasyDraft, it's great. Rake-free tournaments, you just pay a monthly fee. You can pay $6 a month and get up to $1,000 rake-free. So if you want to avoid those hefty 15-17% rakes on other sites, why not just play on FantasyDraft? That's what I do. So, that's what I got.
Yeah, in the world of fantasy sports, there aren't too many no-brainers. That seems like one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for tonight, first of all, thanks everyone for tuning in again. Feel free to throw in your comments, questions throughout the show. We'll try to get to them as we can. We're going to break down in depth both teams, Philadelphia and Dallas. Position by position, team by team, and lead you all the way up until lock for tonight's matchup. So we already know Nolan likes the Eagles. I'll be honest with you, I do too. Dallas has been sputtering, but that said, you know what? They're home, they're favorites. So who knows, right? It'll be a tough matchup either way. Let's go ahead and start with Philly, shall we?
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I guess there's nowhere else to start other than the quarterback position. It starts and ends with Carson Wentz. Looks like Carson will certainly be a favorite tonight. How are you approaching him as you're putting together lineups tonight, Nolan?
Well, I guess if I'm using Carson Wentz, I'm just going to pull up our what we have him projected for, and we'll kind of go over some of the Osmo. We have this top stacks tool. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are familiar with it, but basically it tells you, the top stacks tool tells you the captain ownership, the likelihood that they're going to be the top player according to Osmo's projections, the utility ownership, and the likelihood that they will be one of the 2 to 6 top players as well. So if you're not having them in the captain spot. So right now we have Carson Wentz projected for about 15% captain ownership and about a 10% chance of being the top player. His utility ownership is projected at where have we got him? 44%, and he is projected to be have a 75% shot at being one of the top 6 players. So I think the sweet spot for him tonight is not using him in the captain spot. Looks to be that you have you're going to gain some leverage on the field if you don't do that. There are a lot of other options on these teams that I think we'll get to that I will be more likely to use in that captain spot. And then, of course, if we're pairing up Carson Wentz, it's looking a lot like more and more that this Eagles offense is fairly concentrated. We're seeing about 86 to 95% snap counts for Jeffrey Engelhor. And then Mac Hollins about a 60% last time. And then, of course, both tight ends being worked in as well. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets. So I like Wentz as a play. I prefer him in the utility spot. And I like the fact that there are a few cheap options as well to pair him up with if you want to get to some of these Cowboys.
Yeah, no, good points, and thanks for sharing those percentages. It's stuff you got to factor in, right? It's so easy to want to get behind the QB, throw him in the captain spot, but you got to be smart about doing that. A lot of people are going to be doing it, and they're not always the highest points scored. I mean, passing touchdowns we know only not worth as much as receiving touchdowns or rushing touchdowns. So things to factor in as you're putting your lineups together. You talked about stacking them up, and wide receivers is such an important position every week. It seems like Alshon is the obvious favorite, and coming off some good weeks here recent since getting healthy. Who, looking at costs, those things factoring in, are there stacks that you'd recommend, stacks that you prefer for tonight?
I like using the tool on FC, and if you're mass multi-entering, then you can there's a pro feature that you can set to make your quarterback correlate with either at least 2 position groupings from wide receiver or tight end. So I like doing that, and then just crunching. If you're hand building, I think there are a number of different ways that you can go. There are some cheap options available. Mac Hollins is running routes at let's see. So he's run since Deshaun Jackson's been out. He's 4th on the team in routes run. He's getting about a 60 to 80% receiving clip depending on the game. So, 60% to 80% snap share. And then you have Dallas Goedert as well, who is running in 2 tight end sets. He has 54 routes run since Deshaun Jackson left and since he returned from injuries. So those are 2 cheap options. I was hoping that one of them might go under-owned. Unfortunately, that's not looking like the case right now. They're both getting about similar ownership, somewhere in that like 12 to 16% range. Because they are pretty great bargains. And because this passing game is fairly centralized, you really only have about 5 options if you're not pairing them with some of the running backs. So I like Goddard and Hollins as value plays. And then, of course, Jeffrey, Engelhor, and Ertz are your main options if you're running with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and it seems like Philly is a team that I think a lot of people are getting behind after Dallas has struggled late. So things that you got to factor in when putting together those lineups, who you're stacking people up with, and how you're balancing the costs. Which brings us to the another interesting position. It seems like it's always an interesting position for the Philadelphia Eagles, the running back spot. It's somewhat become a 2-headed monster as of late with Darren Sproles, we know, out with an injury tonight. It's the Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders combination. And I saw one question coming in about approaching those 2 options tonight. Projections, those sorts of things. What's the lay of the land as it comes to the running back spot in Philadelphia for tonight?
Yeah, so I guess we're supposed to assume, I think, that Jordan Howard has kind of taken a lot of the snaps recently. In week 6, he outsnapped Miles Sanders 63% to 29%. In week 5, that was an even split. So if we figure that that's a trend, then I guess that Howard is more likely to play here. However, I'm not entirely sure that that's going to be the case. Right now, let me look at our ownership projections. We have, I'm just going to pull it up, Sanders. So the good news is if you want to roster Miles Sanders, you're probably looking at about 20% utility ownership, somewhere in the 20 to 25 range. And whereas Jordan Howard is going to be, Jordan Howard's about 25% as well. We project Jordan Howard a lot higher than Miles Sanders just based on the usage rates of late. So I probably would be more likely to go with Jordan Howard here, but I could see Miles Sanders as a pivot. And we do have a bit of Dallas is kind of defending both pass and the run at equally I don't want to say bad, but equally below average rates. So there isn't really much of a funnel here. I'm not expecting the Eagles to pass or run. It'll just really depend on game scripts, and of course that's one of the important things when you're building those lineups is to try to think of game scripts and narratives as you're building them.
Yeah, one statistic that I found interesting that EMAC mentioned in his article, if you guys ever check out awesemo.com, EMAC puts together a great article breaking down the Sunday primetime game every week, was that Dallas has only given up only one receiver has eclipsed the 100-yard mark, and that was Robbie Anderson last week. We know a lot of that came on one big play. So, as you're approaching it, keeping that in mind, Philly has kind of spread the wealth. It looks like projections are fairly similar. Is this one of those, and we can get to it later, but is this one of those nights where maybe you play Sanders and Howard?
Yeah, I could absolutely see it. Like, I think that would be a contrarian approach, but you have a game script there. Like, Philly goes up early. We've seen that work in the past. We saw that work with the Pittsburgh Steelers game recently, where Jalen Samuels and James Conner were both in the top 6, some of the top plays that night. I believe we saw it work in another one other showdown slate this year, but I can't remember which one. So I've got no problem going back-to-back running backs. I mean, that's a great point. Like, I think a lot of that's kind of like the narrative that you want to build, right? So if you go running back, maybe you throw in the Philly defense or something. All of a sudden, you've crafted a narrative where the Philadelphia Eagles get up early, and the Dallas Cowboys have to pass to get back into that game, and you can load up on passing options the other way. But yeah, so I obviously, running backs don't normally correlate well together. There's negative correlation. With that being said, it is a contrarian move to put both of them in the same lineup more often than not.
Yeah, I think there's only a few teams I'd probably feel comfortable doing that. Green Bay seems to be another team that has leveraged both running backs very well.
Chargers now after Austin Eckler becomes like their star wide receiver or something.
Yeah, it's incredible how that works, and you're always reluctant to do it. But to your point, it could be a contrarian play. Not a lot of people like to do it. So in a team like them, here's the thing: is Jordan Howard is he maybe going to end up with one or two more attempts than Sanders? Probably. Is he going to get the goal line carry? You'd think so, but it seems to be kind of, I don't want to say game flow, but just really as they rotate these guys out, whoever kind of ends up, in the game as they get, down low close seems to be the one getting the pay dirt. So interesting to see where that lands tonight. And
that's a great point as well. So like inside the 5-yard line this year, Jordan Howard is 5th in the league with 9 rushes, 6 attempts, 9 yards, and 4 touchdowns so far. So he ranks tied for 3rd with 6 attempts inside the 5-yard line, which that's a pretty big deal. Miles Sanders just 2 attempts by comparison. So I definitely think that when you're rostering Howard, you've got that touchdown upside, and that's why I think he's probably projecting a lot better for us, and projects even as a captain spot or as utility spot. He's going to be a better option just because of the touchdown upside.
Yeah, definitely things you want to consider as you're putting those lineups together. Again, costs I think are pretty similar. Projections are pretty similar. I'll tell you what, as a Bears fan, I would love to have Jordan Howard back right now. They can't seem to get anything going on the ground right now or through the air for that matter. But we won't get into that. We'll stay on topic. Moving right along. You mentioned the Philadelphia defense, perhaps building the going on the conversation of Philly gets up, maybe they're running the ball, defense makes a few plays. We don't know how banged up this Dallas, not only offensive line, but wide receiver core is. You like Philly's defense tonight? They haven't been as good as maybe they have been in the past. Mm-hmm. How you approach them? Do you think this is more of a shootout as we get towards the end of the game? Yeah,
no, I like the Philly defense tonight. I do. I think that one of the reasons is just that their pass rush is pretty epic. They're ranked top 5 in the graded by PFF at generating a pass rush, and this Cowboys offensive line has been on a downward trajectory since they've been so injured. So I think that's a huge advantage, and that's another one of the reasons why I like the Eagles so much in the betting markets tonight as well, +3. In terms of a play, again, like you're going to want to craft a narrative, but like we see so much with so much randomness sometimes. Like we saw someone take down all the money with the Chiefs defense and no Mahomes, I think last time out. So anything can happen in these tournaments. But if you're trying to correlate, you probably might think about pairing up the Eagles defense with, say, one of those running backs. We have the Eagles defense projected for 1.7% ownership in the captain spot. We give them about a 0.6% chance of being the top scorer on the night. So probably not the best captain spot, not getting a lot of leverage there. As well, we have them as a 16% chance to finish in the top 2 to 6, but they're only getting 9% ownership. So you get a little bit of leverage that way if you want to go with the Eagles. They are pretty cheap. So a lot of people will be, I think, moving to the kickers tonight for their cheap options. So this is the spot I like. You're probably going to see a few sacks. Maybe you can get a pick, though. I'm not super reliant on that secondary.
Yeah, they got torched by Minnesota, Kirk Cousins, the other week. So, yeah, they haven't been great in the secondary. Run defense has been a little bit better for them, which leads us into probably Zeke. Well, we might as well start there. He is the projected to be the most owned, roughly a little over 80% owned for Dallas tonight. Usually we start the quarterback. Let's just jump right into Zeke Elliott because he is the leader in the clubhouse, so to speak. From that perspective, is Zeke a fade tonight? How are we approaching him?
It's really
ownership. With potential gameplay. What's your thoughts there, Nolan?
Yeah, like my initial response from my own perspective is that he's a fade, but I will contradict that with Awesomo's rankings very shortly. Sorry, I'm just going to adjust my screen here. My thinking that he was a fade is just because Philadelphia's run defense pretty mediocre, but their pass defense and their coverage grades are awful. And we all know that the way to attack the Philadelphia Eagles is through their secondary, through their weakened secondary. We've seen wide receiver ones light them up all season. So I'm assuming that the Philadelphia game plan, the Dallas game plan is going to be to go through the air. That being said, they have a hobbled Randall Cobb. They have hobbled Amari Cooper, and they might not be able to pass the ball at the same rate at which they want to. So banged up Cowboys offensive line, pass funnel, defense leads me away from Zeke Elliott. However, the Osmo projections have Zeke Elliott as a 35% chance to be the top scoring player on this slate tonight. And I can't remember the last time I saw a number that high. He's only getting about 16% ownership in the captain spot. So if I'm using these projections and I always default to the Osmo projections because they're so much smarter. They synthesize so many more data points than ever random cherry pick narratives that we can talk about here. And that's the importance of projections. So I will be loading up on as much Ezekiel Elliott in the captain spot as I can tonight. And then in the utility, we give him about a 45% chance of being 2 to 6, and he's got about 40 to 50 ownership. So give me some Zeke Elliott, give me in the captain spot. I don't care about the narratives. They're probably going to feed him the ball, and he's got that upside in the passing attack as well. So you're going to get huge leverage on the field if you throw him in the captain.
Yeah, and then so the question from there is, who are you pairing Zeke with? So if you do put him in that captain spot, Nolan, are you doubling down? Are you playing Dak as well? Or how are you balancing that out?
I think you absolutely can. I mean, we've seen him get a ton of work in the passing game. They started off a little bit slowly, but he's starting to build up a little more. 7 targets 3 weeks ago, 6 targets last week. Hasn't had more than 50 yards receiving this year, but I see no reason not to pair him up with Dak Prescott. It's just that you have to think about correlation there as well, and there's going to be some negative correlation between your quarterback and your running back in these showdown slates. It doesn't matter as much as on a larger slate, obviously, but I have no problem pairing Zeke Elliott up with Dak Prescott, especially if we think it's going to be a contrarian move.
We shall see where it goes. We were high on Philadelphia. It seems like these showdown slates, week after week, the whatever the favorite is doesn't happen, or whatever America thinks is going to happen doesn't happen. We're on Philadelphia. It's probably going to be Dallas. So we'll see where it lands tonight. I think the one position that really is interesting, that does have some meat to it. I don't want to jump past. We talked about Zeke. is the running back, the backup for Dallas. I'm sorry, his name is Pollard. Thank you, Tony Pollard. Is he someone that he hasn't gotten as much run lately as he had in some of the earlier weeks? Is he someone you're considering? Maybe someone that, hey, Zeke gets him all the way down there and he ends up punching it in, or he breaks a long one. We've seen him do that a couple times. Any love for our friend Tony Pollard tonight?
No, I'm not super fussed on him tonight. Only 7 offensive snaps in week 6, just 4 carries. He seems to be being phased further and further out of this offense as Zeke has come back here. He was involved a little bit early on in the season, but he's nothing more than, I think, a flyer at this point. You're probably not going to get more than 10 snaps out of him tonight, and probably not more than 4 carries. So right now, I'm just going to check our ownership projection because he doesn't seem like a terrible flyer. We just don't have him projected for much ownership. 0 in the captain spot, about 1.4%, about 12% ownership and utility, and we only have him projected for a 1% chance of being one of the top 2 to 6 players. So I will be probably close to full fading Pollard tonight.
Yeah, and barring an injury to Zeke, Pollard isn't the play, right?
That's exactly the thing. It's like these games are so crazy. Like Mahomes goes out, and I can't tell if that guy who won the all the monies on Thursday, was he a genius because he's like, all right, Mahomes has an ankle injury here. Maybe we put in Kelsey and Hill without him, or is he just a random fish? I don't know. Either way, I hate them.
Well, he can claim it either way. He can claim genius, right? Because there's no proving otherwise, at least at this point. So as we move right along, we talked about the wide receiver position a little bit for Dallas already. There's both Cobb and Cooper banged up, both quad injuries. I think Cooper also may have had a foot or an ankle as well. So he's been dealing with quite a bit. He came right out of that game last week. And I was a little surprised to see him turn around and be even available for tonight's matchup. So we got him. We got Gallup. Was I think where a lot of people were leading up until tonight in the event that Cooper or Cobb were out. Gallup was a guy that a lot of people were high on, and he's even produced when those players have been available. Approaching this position, if we're saying that Philadelphia, who's had a historically weak pass D over the last few weeks, giving it up to guys like Kirk Cousins. Who do we like on that Dallas? It seems kind of high risk, high reward, just because of the injuries. We talked about Mahomes like getting knocked out. Is this we're playing someone low on the maybe second or third stringer because one of these guys could leave the game early? How do you approach the wide receiver spot tonight?
I'm not doing that, but like you could certainly try throwing in some Tavon Austin. He clearly was he stepped into that Cobb role last week, and I think he had 6 targets or something. He was actually kind of impressive. But with Cobb healthy, I don't see why they would rush him back. Cooper as well, healthy. I don't know what's going on with the quadricep ankle injuries over there in Dallas, but he looks good to go. So if he wasn't, I don't think they would force him back in. I have no problem going to any of these guys tonight. I think a lot of people are thinking about that though, and thinking that narrative, just because this Philly pass defense has been so bad. But we've seen wide receivers just kind of kill it in the captain spot thus far. There are a number of different ways to win this, to win these tournaments, but wide receiver in the captain spot seems like they do have the highest upside more often than not, though some of our numbers might contradict that. So we have Amari Cooper at a 7% captain ownership and about a 15% chance of being the top player tonight. That is interesting as well. I think that's probably a really smart play if you're pairing him up with Dak and then the rest of your lineup as well. Maybe you can correlate some other pieces of that Cowboys offense, but that's a huge gap. We don't usually see that. So give me some Amari Cooper in the captain spot tonight, and I think that's where I'll most likely go to roster him. Assuming he's healthy, I think that's probably why the ownership's down. We could actually see that ownership rise now that he's been activated, but it's probably a little bit lower than what we think he's going to, what his odds are being the top player. So.
Yeah, Cooper's been a guy that when he's been on the field and healthy, especially this season, he's been huge. And really since Dallas has acquired him mid last season, he's been a great player for them. It seems to be Dak's go-to guy. But with the injuries, who knows? This could be a night where someone like a Gallup steps up. Although when given the opportunity last week, he didn't quite step into the spotlight as I think they would have hoped. Some drops, those sorts of things. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes tonight. Assuming with Cooper on the field, Philadelphia will focus on trying to slow him down. We'll see where the injury lands, and maybe some of those other guys can step up and provide some help.
And if we are going with this, if we do believe this Eagles secondary is as bad as we think it is, Devontae Adams went for I think 10 180 or 190 against them. Stephon Diggs last week went for 3 scores and 170 yards.
A bajillion yards. Yeah.
Julio Jones lit them up. Marvin Jones lit them up. So this has just been the flow chart for number 1 wide receivers so far this season. I have no problem going to Cooper. But a lot of people are high on Gallup. I could see why. He's got all the talent in the world. He's another option if you want to go for that big score wide receiver at the top. If you're doing that, and if you are playing one of these guys in the captain position, you do probably have to correlate a little bit less with your quarterbacks, because if the likelihood that, say, Amari Cooper is the number 1 scoring player on this slate and he pays off his value in that captain spot, that means that you're he's probably going to score 2 touchdowns, get 150 yards. And the likelihood then that Dak Prescott is tossing the ball around to a lot of other players is lessened. So you might only want to stack him up with one other wide receiver or with Zeke Elliott, but just be cognizant of that if you're using the wide receiver in the captain spot.
No, great advice. Those are the things that I think it's helpful to think about, especially for folks that aren't, a lot of our viewers, do this a lot, and are experts in their own right. Certainly, we have some folks that are newer to the daily fantasy, and sometimes these little tips like that can be really helpful and pay dividends. We talked about some of the key guys, Tavon Austin, someone that stepped up last week, but not someone that we love. He seems like his days of being a key contributor are well behind him for the most part. Looking at the tight end position, Jason Witten coming back out of the booth to relativity. He's been okay. He hasn't been great. We also have the wide receiver position with the injuries that you're considering there. Is Witten someone that you like a little bit more tonight than nights and other nights for Dallas?
I'm personally not super on him. He's pretty expensive. Well, what is he on? He's 5,200. Let's take a look at his targets here. Have them handy. So 4, 4, and 7 targets over the last few games. Generally seems to go in that 4 target range. Has had a couple touchdowns early on in the season, but hasn't had one in 4 games. I think if you're rostering him, you're essentially hoping for that touchdown because the receiving yardage isn't really there. He's more of a safer play with a safe floor. So if you happen to be running in some cash games tonight, I think I'd probably like Witten a little bit more. Philly's defense, a little bit better Philly's defense against tight end ranked 8th in DVOA. So that's a pretty talented squad against tight ends. Not the way to attack them. I'm probably on the fading side of things tonight, but let's take a look what Osmo thinks about Jason Witten. So we have him projected for about 19% utility ownership and about a 10% chance of being one of the top 6 players. So there you go. Probably another good reason to fade Witten tonight.
Yeah, someone that seems to be that safety blanket. They try to get him the ball when they get close, and good around the middle of the field. Good on some of those bootlegs they like to run, and know that they're banged up at the wide receiver position. Maybe he gets 1 or 2 extra targets tonight. We shall see. Other tight end for Dallas, not really getting a whole lot of consideration is Blake Jarwin. Did you fire up Blake Jarwin anywhere tonight, Nolan?
I don't think so. He's just I'd far rather go to someone like a Dallas Goedert.
Yeah.
Let me just look up his routes run real quick so I don't give anyone some bad advice here, because he's getting a decent amount of snaps, and he's run about 38 routes over the last 3 weeks, which isn't all that bad to be honest with you. Let's take a look here. So Yeah, since from weeks 4 to 6, he ranks 7th on the Cowboys, 38 routes run. Leading the Cowboys, of course, there have been some injuries there, is Zeke Elliott, to your point earlier about pairing him up with Dak Prescott. Probably a good idea. And Jason Witten actually 2nd in routes run for the Dallas Cowboys over that time span. So maybe a little bump up for Witten there. But unless like Blake Jarwin is the kind of play where you're just essentially using him as a differentiation point in your lineups, in your chalkier builds. He's getting about 10% ownership, and we have him projected for a 1% chance of being one of the top 2 to 6 players. So he's by all accounts a bad play, but of course in a chalky lineup, when you're trying to differentiate somewhere, you might want to throw him in because stranger things can happen, and obviously these tight ends are red zone threats that can catch touchdown at any time.
Absolutely. We shall see, but no, good information there. Appreciate you cross-referencing that. One position we didn't touch on tonight, which is usually overlooked, but a position that sometimes can pan out, can pay dividends, is the kicker spot tonight. Is there one that you prefer over the other? Let's put it that way.
No, but I do think though that you should probably, it's that same like thing I've been harping the entire time, like probably think about like what your roster construction is going to look like. But at the same time, like we have these kickers projected for between 8 and 9 points. Maher is about 1 point more than Jake Elliott. So these kickers are great values. They're continually mispriced over on DraftKings. We don't really know why that pricing hasn't been corrected. People do, I think, play them and have caught on to the fact that they are good plays in tournaments. It was a little bit, for a while, it kind of looked like a bad play, but we're getting, the ownership seems pretty sharp tonight. It's pretty much on par with where they are. We have them about 18 to 20%, and we have them about a 15% chance of being in the top. So I like throwing kickers in because they're just such good value spots, and they make for pivot points at slightly lower ownership than a lot of these other players. So it's a good way to kind of diversify your lineups, but still having that built-in safety as well.
Yeah, interesting. It seems Elliott is the at least right now projected to be played more than Mayer for Dallas, even though Mayer is a little bit more expensive and playing at home tonight. So something to consider if you're throwing kickers around tonight.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, buddy.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah, but yeah, we've seen it happen all season long. Kickers have been featured prevalently in a lot of these winning lineups. So don't be scared of rostering a kicker tonight.
Yeah, it's like it's not the sexy pick, right? You're like you look at all these other players, you're like, oh well, this could happen, or I really like this guy, or just the fact that he's a kicker, right? And you're like, well, what's the max they can have? Well, double digits, 15 points out of your kicker is better than a lot of these, other guys that are on that same cost, right? So definitely something you want to factor in putting together rosters tonight. So now we've touched on each position, we've kind of drained through each player. Again, guys, feel free to keep throwing in your questions. We'll try to get to them as we can. We talked a little bit about your approach, whether it's 2 running backs, doing stacks. If you have a wide receiver in the captain spot, being careful about how many other people you latch on from that team. The 2 quarterback question oftentimes comes up, and a night like tonight where Wentz and you have two big names that are going to cost you, and it might be tough to roster both in your respective lineup. How often, do you try to do that? Is that something you're looking at for tonight's matchup and saying, hey, because I really like both these guys, I want to try to do that and I'll try to save elsewhere? How are you approaching, whether it's the 2 quarterback play tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so quarterbacks are often projected as some of the safest plays on the board with the highest potential of being in the 2 to 6 spot in the utility. So, I mean, I like Dak in the captain spot. Just a cursory build. I'm going to do a quick build after we get out of here, but just a cursory build gave me a lot of Dak Prescott in the captain spot using Awesemo's rankings. So he's probably a pretty sharp captain spot today. If you're correlating quarterbacks, I see no problem. We've seen it happen all throughout the showdown season so far. Last slate, or the Detroit Green Bay slate, it was Rodgers and Stafford on there. We've seen it with let's see, Wilson and Goff, with Rodgers and Wentz. So it happens more often than not, and it's correlated that if one quarterback is going off, then it's likely that the other quarterback is also going to go off as well. So I like rostering both quarterbacks in as many lineups as possible. It's just a matter of finding. They're always highly owned, so it's just a matter of finding some unique combinations. And of course, you got to pay attention to the Vegas line too, right? So, there's more likelihood with I think, what's the total tonight? 48. With a higher total in the higher 40s, it's also more likely that you're going to see both quarterbacks go off. So 49.5, it's moving on up.
49.5, sir. Yeah.
So this is one of the higher totals tonight. Fire up Wentz, fire up Dak. Got no problem using them in the same lineup for sure.
Some fireworks in Dallas tonight. We shall, in Jerry's world, we shall see. I'm interested to see how these injuries play out tonight. I think that's going to be definitely a storyline to factor in as you're putting together lineups tonight. The guys banged up, while people are getting the healthy tag, or at least the active tag, I should say. All it takes is that one play, that one tweak, and they could easily be out. So risk versus reward, certain things to keep in mind. I heard a rumor that Antonio Brown his name was getting tossed around for someone the Cowboys might.
I think that was just Michael Irvin talking, wasn't it?
Was that Michael Irvin?
I think so. Yeah, I think he said that they should go out and sign him, but I would highly doubt that that's actually going to happen. Not to be the bearer of bad news, because I think that would be pretty fun to watch, but I got a feeling the NFL doesn't want Antonio Brown in the league this year.
No, that's probably a good point. I think the only people that want him in are the people that maybe drafted him in a season-long league and, just held on to him in the hopes that, that he'd, surface somewhere. But, the wide receiver position is definitely something to pay attention to tonight. The Eagles running back is definitely an interesting thing. A lot of people asking about that. We mentioned Howard's, statistics within the 5-yard line, so definitely things to keep in mind as we kind of recap some of the points from earlier. What else is on your mind as we approach lock within the next 10 minutes?
I'm just having a little look down here. It looks like maybe Tavon Austin. That's too bad. He was so cheap. It's too bad that Cobb was in, because that would have been an auto play. But if you want to get risky there, I'm not really seeing. I think you can limit your player pool pretty much tonight. You can cut out a lot of these cheaper options. I think they're going to be traps. The lowest I would go is probably Dallas Goedert, and it depends on the size of your contest too, right? So if you're in one of these big ones and you want that prize all to yourself, you can either leave a little cash on the table, or you can find one of these low-owned plays, a la Allen Lazard a couple weeks back or last week. But for the most part, I think you can concentrate your player pool, mass multi-enter, try to find leverage points within that lineup, like using some of these guys that we have over at Osmo.com that are projected for less captain ownership than they should have. So that's what I'll be doing tonight. That's where I'm getting my leverage, is going with guys like Amari Cooper in the captain spot, and with Ezekiel Elliott in the captain spot, and hoping that they pay off their position, and I'm overweight on the field on them. Yeah.
One name, as we, again, just 5 minutes or so here until we wrap. One name that we didn't mention that saw more action early on, and it was actually a showdown slate that we did early in the season. It was that crazy game where Philadelphia had both Alshon and Deshaun Jackson get injured. Nelson Aguilar ended up stepping in that night, having a big game. He had a pretty good game after that. Has since kind of come back to reality and and where he typically scores. Is he some of that you like tonight, Aguilar? Knowing that Deshaun's out, while they have been running the two tight end stuff pretty frequently, is Aguilar someone that you're firing up?
I'm not super excited to play him. No, I think for the most part that it was Jeffrey, and I think Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson were out during that time period where he was lighting it up, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So the like for like replacement there for him is or I guess like the fact that those two are back in the lineup, it's going to mean less targets. There's nothing wrong with playing him tonight, but I don't know. then no, I certainly wouldn't be. He's certainly not one of my top captain choices because I feel like the upside isn't there in this situation. So, but yeah, stranger things, right? We currently have him projected for about a 5% chance of being the top play, 5% ownership and only a 1% chance of being the top play tonight. So you're probably better off not using him in the captain spot more often than not.
Yeah, no, good point. It's one of those things. I think they've tried to do a lot of things with Aguilar and make him more than I think really what he is. And he's been a decent slot receiver for them, but maybe not someone that's going to take the top off the defense, creating some of the big plays. Occasionally, you can break loose. They'll do things like reverses and end arounds to him and try to get the ball on his hands in the outside, but not so much up and down the field.
Yeah, and I should have said earlier, I think Matt Collins is probably, I was just looking at his price. I didn't realize he was this cheap. Matt Collins for $400 with the amount of routes that he's running, the amount of share that he has in this offensively. I kind of like him at that price point tonight. He hasn't really done much with his targets. But he's so cheap that I think you can pretty easily fit him into your lineup. 60% snap share last week. I might fire him up a little bit more higher than the field. We have him projected for around 10 to 15% ownership.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that when people are probably putting together their lineups tonight and they're looking at who am I saving? Where's the value at tonight? It's maybe someone like him, maybe someone like a Goddard, but to your point, projections a little bit lower. So someone that not everybody else is behind, and he's even cheaper than that. So if you're throwing in we talked about Dak or Zeke being in the captain spot, someone you want to consider there.
Absolutely.
Who else? Anyone else that we don't want to leave any stone unturned here when we're breaking down these showdown slates. Any other stone that hasn't been turned up as far as position player goes? Guys, throw it in the comments. Anybody else that comes to mind for you, Nolan?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Like one guy we haven't touched on too much is Zach Ertz, but for me, he's going to be predominantly used in the utility spot if I use him. He just hasn't really shown that upside. Dallas pretty good at defending the tight end position, so I like him as a play, but I prefer him in the flex spot and not the captain spot tonight.
It's funny. Zach Ertz is the player that we're not mentioning, and he's like the most consistent player week after week for Philadelphia. It hasn't had like that big breakout game that everybody's kind of waiting for, right? Like when he has that 10 catch, 100+ yard and a touchdown game, he's been kind of steady as he goes. So I think I saw some people commenting in. They liked him in the captain spot tonight. We shall see. Again, Dallas has been pretty tough against the tight end spot. So be interested to see where Ertz lands tonight. 7:14, so we're getting close to lock here. Any last minute things before we wrap and look forward to tomorrow night's Monday night matchup where the Patriots will be taking on the New York Jets in the Meadowlands. Yeah,
should be. I kind of like the Jets side of that one. I feel like they're going to keep it close. Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one. I'm a believer in the Jets now that everyone's getting healthy. So we'll see. Dallas actually ranks, I should say, 29th in DVOA against tight end. I had it written down that they were 19th, so I must have written that down wrong. That's not bad. Not bad. Not a bad little spot there if you want to pop Ertz in the captain spot. So
good point. Good point.
Not bad. I think Ertz is not so bad in that top spot. So fire him up.
We'll call that a typo, right? The 1 and the 2 key are right next to each other. All right, cool. Well, any other last minute thoughts before we wrap?
We got 5 minutes left. Go get those lineups in, and we'll be back tomorrow night. It's me and EMAC breaking down the Monday nighter slate, so should be good. You got about 4 minutes to build left. Go get her. Go get that Awesemo subscription. Take a look at that captain ownership, the top owned percentage. It's such a huge, valuable tool every week. We appreciate you guys watching, though. If you don't mind hitting that like button on the way out as well. We will be back same time tomorrow, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, to do like an hour before the game, something like that, something close to that. Good luck tonight, everyone. I think someone watching is gonna take it down.
I think so too. We'll see. I'm gonna throw in one last minute lineup myself. Thanks everyone for watching. Nolan, you have a good night tonight, sir. Good luck. See you later.